is it's a lifestyle. You know, like if somebody's sitting there with a cigarette hanging out of their mouth and a beer and they're talking to you about health, they're probably not healthy.
Right.
So to me, it was always like, hey, I better live this stuff. I better go to the gym. I better lift the weights. I better at least try to look and feel healthy, but more importantly, be interested in health, be interested in all the cutting edge knowledge, be interested in all the documentaries you and I and many of your listeners probably watch, right? I mean, we all know who Caldwell Esselstyn and Colin Campbell and John McDougall and all of these guys are. Whether we agree with everything they say or not, we certainly need to know who they are if we're into our health, because they're the cutting edge guys. And women, by the way, I should say women as well. They're the people.
You're listening to the Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show. I'm your host, Kathleen Gage. We're here to plant seeds on compassion to animals, your health, and the environment, and topics related to business that align with all three of those areas. Enjoy the show. Well, I am so excited today because I'm talking to a rock star. This guy he's a high performer in network marketing, actually top performer in 4 different companies. He is a black belt in, now, John, what's the style in black belt?
Well,
Judo?
Judo.
And what's BJJ?
Also Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Okay.
I got my first black belt from the Kodokan in Japan, 1992, a long time ago. And then started jiu-jitsu later in life when it became kind of a craze here in Texas. I earned that one. I got that one a while, for about 15 years on that one. And then I also did Sambo, which people think that I dance. You would not want to see me dance. It'd be very scary, like a dancing bear. Sambo is Russian wrestling, which is a combination of freestyle wrestling, which is very popular here and in Russia, and also judo. So they kind of, the Russians combined it as their martial art many years ago for both their military and their law enforcement people. So I did some of that also and competed in that for a number of years. So I beat my body up pretty good.
Well, I was going to say, basically, you're somebody you wouldn't want to mess with. I mean, period. But let me tell people who you are. John Solleder is your name, and I am Kathleen Gage. I am the host of Plant-Based Eating for Health. And it's interesting because one of the criteria for people being on my show is that they be vegan. I mean, I subscribe to a vegan lifestyle, and it's just my branding, it's my commitment, it's my alignment. And you're like, oh, definitely vegan. And yet, before we started actually having this conversation, we were talking about back in the day during bodybuilding days. And I actually was a bodybuilder at one point in my mid-30s, so we're going back quite a few years. And my trainer was a placeholder in Mr. America, huge guy, but huge because he took the juice. And everybody that he trained ended up going on the juice. Well, I had just gotten into recovery for drugs and alcohol. So there was a part of me that said, no, that's a drug. I can't do that. And when I told him no, he said, I'm not going to train you anymore. And it's like, okay. And I think that was such a blessing that I didn't go down that road. But one of the things we did as bodybuilders is we'd have those workouts. And then, like you said, we'd go out and have meat. So Talk to us, first of all, about your journey into becoming vegan. Why did you become vegan? And you said that actually has helped you in your business acumen.
Well, here's kind of my story. So 8 years ago, October 18th to be precise, coming up to October here shortly, I was in a Brahms restaurant here in Dallas. My son was playing hockey still. He was on the ice, and there was a Brahms next to the rink. And I went over to eat dinner while he was practicing. And I had a 4-cheeseburger, French fries, and a milkshake. And I said, really good. Tasted great. But I'm sitting there thinking, I know I'm in pain all the time with all the sports stuff that I did. I was constantly in pain. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go one day vegetarian. Just one day, like the next day. This was a Friday night. So Saturday, I'm going vegetarian. I'm just not going to eat any meat for a day. I'll eat pasta. I'll eat something. I'll survive. And by the way, at the time, I'm 90 pounds heavier than I am now, too. So I could survive a long time. Yeah. Didn't know it at the time. Since I've done water fasts and things, I realized you don't need all this food. But anyway, to make a long story short on that was a Friday night. And when I got to Sunday morning, I got up to go to church, and I said to my wife, I said, you know what? Maybe it's here, but I feel better. Now, it might be because I didn't consume any animal products, because at that time I wasn't an animal rights person. I was just not eating them just
Right.
really for that particular day. I since have kind of gone to distance on all the things with animals rights as well. But that was one day. And then, as circumstance would have it, that week I'm walking on the treadmill at the gym. And I let myself get heavy after my athletic career. I had a lot of surgeries, and I just did what a lot of guys do. Is just I ate like I was training, and you go see this with a lot of pro football players, and you see some that do the smart thing, go the other way. But I was on the treadmill, and boy, I'm going to forget her name now. She's a blonde-haired girl. She used to be on Fox, and she Megan Kelly.
Megan Kelly.
She had a talk show. And at the gym, of course, you don't hear the sound, but they've got the words going on the bottom. And she brings these three guys out, and the initial picture of them is three obese gentlemen. They come out, they're not obese. They all look terrific. And it turns out they're from Louisiana, which if you want to eat wrong, go to Louisiana. I mean, they'll help you do it. They fry everything. And they come out and they explain their story. And the one guy says, I watched a documentary that was very helpful called Forks Over Knives. Never heard of that before. Came home, said to my wife, let's watch this documentary tonight. First time I ever heard of people like Colin Campbell or Caldwell Esselstyn or Rip
Right.
Esselstyn or, the whole cast of guys that kind of worked together with that. Of course, I knew who Jack LaLanne was and Jay Kordich and all that. Those guys were idols of mine, but I didn't know any of these contemporary medical people. And I watched that, and I said to my wife, by the way, I had continued that whole week be vegetarian. This was a Thursday, so about 5 days. I said, I'm going to continue on this path because I definitely feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And, how do you get anybody to do anything? Put them in pain. And then if you can ease their pain a little bit. So all of a sudden, the pain started letting up a little bit in my joints. And I said, well, this is really interesting. I'm going to continue on this. And I was still eating fish, by the way, at the time. I'd given up meat products and meat. I'd given up meat. I'd given up dairy, but I had not given up the fish yet. For some reason, I thought fish were different, that they didn't have feelings. I since learned otherwise.
Right.
But by January of that year, I gave up fish also. So now I'm 100% plant-based. Everything I'm eating is plant-based, but I'm vegetarian, and I'm still what I would term a junk vegetarian, and you know what that is.
I do.
Eating a lot of the alternative stuff, probably better for you, but probably not all that good overall.
Right.
And then December 23, I'm in one of these chat rooms on Facebook. I'll never forget what it was. It was Watermelon Island that I was on. People who eat watermelon for extended periods of time. And I joined the thing even though I never ate watermelon for a prolonged period of time, but I was interested in what these folks had to say. And I met a guy named Fran Turk from Argentina. And Fran said, hey, would you be interested? I'm putting together a raw vegan group of people starting January 1st. And it was nothing. It was like $30. He's like, you come, you get educated. You're already vegetarian. Maybe you'll like it. If you don't like it, you go back to the way you are. I'm like, no big deal. So I said, I'm a very open-minded person, and I love knowledge. I love information. I've worked around the medical. I'm not a doctor, but I worked around the medical field
Right.
most of my life with researchers. So I'm one of those people who's always asking why. I'm like, you know what? I hear of raw veganism, but I really don't know if I could do it, number one. And number two, I don't really think I understand it. I understand it, at a 10,000 foot level, but I don't really understand it. Let me listen to this guy. So January 1st, 2024, I jumped in raw vegan. And best thing I ever did. My weight dropped. My inflammation dropped. My cholesterol dropped. All of my biomarkers got better. By the time I went to my doctor for my annual physical last July, he looked at me and he laughed. He goes, what are you doing here? You're like 63 years old. You're not supposed to have biomarkers like this. He goes, get out of my office. He's South African. He's very funny. He said, get out of here. He doesn't even be here. I'm like, well, I'm just coming as a precaution. So that's kind of how I started. And I've continued on that path. Haven't lost any strength. Okay, still able to bench with a bench shirt. This is a special shirt that I wear when I bench press. I can still bench press over 400 pounds.
Holy cow.
So I haven't gotten weaker.
Yeah.
I've adopted, I'll come back to you so you can ask me questions, but I've added some things to not only to my diet, but also some of the other things I'm doing athletically.
Well, and I find that fascinating because I actually went plant-based initially because I wouldn't call myself a vegan. I thought vegans were crazy, and now I know we are, and that's okay. But when I started, it was the same reason as you. I was 64 at the time, and that was in 2018, and I was dealing with inflammation. And having been a very active person quite a bit of my life, and priding myself in the fact that as I got older, I was able to do things a lot of younger people couldn't even do. And, kind of getting into ego too about, well, look at how great I'm doing and look at how the rest of the group, the people are doing. And God has an amazing sense of humor because whenever I let ego get too big, I get slammed down. And I was dealing with such bad inflammation. So I did my research and found that if I did plant-based, I might have some relief. And I thought, okay, I'll give it 7 days. You gave it a day. I was going to give it 7 days. Well, within that 7 day period, not only did I start losing weight because I had given up on that, I had gained an excessive amount of weight, went through my mom and dad's passing and did a lot of comfort eating. And in 7 days, I was feeling great. And I thought, okay, I'll give it another 7 days. It's probably a fluke. I was looking for my out. And then I started digging deeper and deeper. Watched the film What the Health, watched Conspiracy, watched all the usual
Yeah.
flavors of documentaries. And there was a point about 6 months into it that I was actually at the grocery store walking by the meat department. I was going off to the fruit and veggie department, and I literally stopped in my tracks and I could feel the pain and suffering. It was like I had such a visceral response to looking at the meat and having had a mindful of information that there's no turning back on. And I thought, how could I have been so blind? And from that point forward, I identified as vegan. But I get what you're saying about the junk food. Now, when you decided to go raw food, are you 100% raw food now?
I'm about 95.
Okay. And I hear it's difficult. Is it true? Is that true? Or is that just a story that we're being told?
It's, I bought a dehydrator.
Okay.
Okay. And that helps because like I love asparagus, for example. And asparagus cold, uncooked at all is really tough to eat.
Right.
But but I really enjoy it. And I'm like, but and there's so many benefits to it. So there's certain things I have deferred on. Okay, asparagus being one of them that basically we'll put into the dehydrator. Okay, for example, there's a nut burger thing that my wife makes for me. Okay, about once a month, and we use the
Hmm.
dehydrator for that. Technically not cooked because of the temperature, but if somebody's a real fundamentalist, which I'm not. Hey, look, I'm a million times healthier than I was when I started this.
Right. Right.
Right. So I'm happy with the results. All right. But I have friends. I was in Costa Rica with some friends that are 100%. And, they were kind of giving me a hard time. Like, well, you're not 100. I'm like 95. Is that like being like 95%? I don't know, whatever, like I'm 95% there. There are days I'm 100%. And
Right.
the
Right.
funny thing is, the days I'm 100% and I'm really disciplined, the next day I always wake up and tell my wife, I feel better. So
Isn't that amazing? It's kind of like, the same with somebody who would have a problem with alcohol and they give up alcohol because I've been sober for 43 years. And it's like before I finally had enough and that was it, I would wake up on those days that I'd say, okay, I'm not going to drink today. And I'd wake up and not have a hangover. It's like, what a concept. So, and it is the same with our food because I was thinking about that on my morning walk today, how food is as addictive as drugs and alcohol because of the chemicals, the ultra processed foods and all that. Now, you have pretty gutsy friends if they give pushback to you and you can bench press 400 and you're a black belt. I mean, it's like, what kind of friends do you hang out with? But quite seriously, I'm curious with the businesses that you run. You've been a high performer in network marketing. What different types of network marketing companies have you been involved with, and how did the way you eat benefit your business abilities?
well, here's the thing. If you're going to be talking about health to people, you should probably be healthy. Now
What a
that doesn't mean
concept.
everybody is, right? Now and everybody, okay, has a different story and a different path. Some people come to, be healthy because they were sick. In my case, I was never an alcoholic. My father was. I gave up alcohol. My 20th birthday was my last drink. And I'm 64 now. I haven't touched booze since. And I come from a long line. It's that Hank Williams Jr. song, right? Family tradition. It's like I got a family tradition of alcoholism. So I recognized at 20 I didn't want to walk the path my dad did.
Right.
Unfortunately, because I was born I was born knock-kneed and pigeon-toed. So from birth to 8, I had to wear braces on my legs. I got the braces off finally. High school football, I get clipped in my back. We find out I got a thing called spondylolisthesis, which I can barely say, and don't ask me to spell it, but some of your doctor friends listening, they know what it is. It's where your vertebrae are wrapped around your spine like
Right.
this. And it choked off the right side of my body. I was crippled. My senior year of high school, but it was, I say I was crippled. I was able to walk, but it was very, very painful. But I had 2 spinal cord surgeries. So what that did for me, Kathleen, was it kind of told me, you got a choice, like Jay Kordich used to say, you got a choice, sickness or health. Like you can jump into the bottle, you can jump into the drugs, you can jump in all that stuff, or you can come back after this back surgery and be an athlete again.
Right.
So by 20, I decided, hey, I really want to be an athlete again. I love sports. I love to compete. I'm one of those weird guys. I love practice. Not everybody does. Even Michael Jordan hated practice, by the way. But I was one of those weird guys. I actually like to go to practice. I like to sweat. And so long story short, I got back into sports. Unfortunately, my body was already so damaged that I wound up doing further damage to it. Okay, so I wound up with shoulder surgery. I haven't had any more back surgery, fortunately. My hips, my left knee, I tore the medial collateral ligament in. I've all these fingers have been busted at one time or another, et cetera, et cetera. But I wouldn't trade my life experiences or my friendships from those sports as a result. But my point about that is, it causes a lot of inflammation, especially as we get older. So for me, the way I ate was important. So to answer your question, I've always been associated with kind of cutting edge technology. For example, I worked with Dr. Albert Leung years ago. He's considered to be the world's leading pharmacognosist, okay, study of herbs. I worked with Dr. Leung on a product that he developed for one company, for example. He made the pharma med, that's not the word, pharma, what did they call this thing? I was just telling somebody this. I'm forgetting the name of it, but for the NIH, basically the database he created for it.
Okay.
Interesting guy, Western education at Michigan, Eastern education at National Taipei University. Great guy. It's still, by the way, still going strong at 85 and still skis.
I love it.
Never has taken a prescription drug, by the way. Interesting. So I learned a little bit about herbs from Dr. Leung. I learned about when I was working with the people I mentioned to you earlier from Oregon. By the way, did I say that right, Oregon? Because some people say Oregon.
Some people say Oregon. Some people say Oregon. Some people say Oregon. So however you say it, we get it. It's funny because I live in the Willamette Valley, and you can tell when somebody's new to the area. They go Willamette. And it's like, no, you're new. So let us explain how to pronounce it. So any way you want to pronounce it.
Anyway, then I worked with not only these two doctors from there in your beautiful state, but also with Dr. Nikolai Volkov, who was the gentleman that really did most of the research on creatine back in Russia. So I worked with him for a number of years with some products that he had put together for a company here in Dallas. And then after that, I left that company. I went to Israel, kind of a sabbatical. I was kind of at a weird point in my life. Not a weird point. I was just kind of like between businesses, single. I had been divorced and no kids. And I went over to Israel to see a friend. And I spent 6 months running around Israel. My mother gets diagnosed with cancer at that time. And I wind up coming back to the U.S., and just through a series of circumstances, wound up working with some professors from Canada, from Montreal, on a glutathione supplement. So I've always been around this cutting edge stuff that it was like, I was talking about creatine in 1993 when people were like, what's creatine? Today, there's no gym or health food store that doesn't sell it, right?
Right.
Same thing with glutathione. 30 years ago, nobody knew what glutathione is. Today, everybody's either taking a glutathione supplement or, should. So I've always been around that kind of stuff. So how did it help, to answer your question specifically? It's a lifestyle. Like if somebody's sitting there with a cigarette hanging out of their mouth and a beer and they're talking to you about health, they're probably not healthy.
Right.
So to me, it was always like, hey, I better live this stuff. I better go to the gym. I better lift the weights. I better at least try to look and feel healthy. But more importantly, be interested in health, be interested in all the cutting edge knowledge, be interested in all the documentaries you and I and many of your listeners probably watch, right? I mean, we all know who Caldwell Esselstyn and Colin Campbell and John McDougall and all of these guys are. Whether we agree with everything they say or not, we certainly need to know who they are if we're into our health, because they're the cutting edge guys. And women, by the way, I should say women as well. They're the people that are doing the research that are enforcing what you and I do on a daily basis in terms of how we eat and why we eat. And yeah, you're not going to starve to death if you don't eat meat. You're actually going to get protein from all these other sources. Oh my God, what a revelation.
What a revelation.
I know that, right? But there's people that still say to me, how can you be a 240-pound guy bench pressing what you do and not be on steroids? Well, it's real simple.
Right.
I've never been on steroids, never taken that crap, number one. But second to that, okay, how do you do that eating a plant-based diet? Well, guess what? I can point out people in the powerlifting world that are much bigger lifters than I am, many of them younger than me, that have all gone to a plant-based diet, not because they necessarily wanted to, but they were tired of the pain
Right.
from all of that meat consumption that led to all of that inflammation process, and they wanted to feel better. Bottom line, they want to have a better quality of life besides the weight room. You're in the weight room an hour a day, but you're living 23 other hours, right?
Absolutely.
You don't want to be in pain if you don't have to be.
Absolutely.
And that's not just for athletes, that's for everybody.
Well, John, I'm curious. I want to dig into creatine because I do take it every day, and I also lift weights, and I don't lift like I used to. I mean, actually, I had a broken wrist a while ago, and it was really interesting watching my mindset around all of that, realizing that I had to ease back in and that I am not in my mid-30s anymore. And the way I lifted in my mid-30s is not going to be the way I'm going to lift today. And yet I can lift very effectively. But one of the things that I've done a lot of research on is creatine, and it seems to be the one supplement that there's no downside to it. So talk to us, if you will, about the benefits of creatine, what it is, and why it would benefit people, especially as we age, because there's the whole issue of brain health too, where a lot of people, it was all about muscle building, but it wasn't about all the other benefits. So what can you tell me about that?
Let's go back to the history of it. The history of it with Dr. Volkov and the Moscow Sports Institute is who he actually worked with. Let's remember what happened, right? The Iron Curtain falls.
Mm-hmm.
You've got all these wonderful scientists over there in the Soviet Union. They got to make a living. And they're researchers, right? So they're brilliant people. So he wound up over here as a result. And one of the things that he told us, now he never spoke English, his daughter always translated for him. But one of the things that they shared with us was the fact that the reason why he was so motivated to start working with creatine was they realized, the Russians realized in the 50s and 60s that a lot of their very top athletes that had been using anabolic steroids were not doing well health-wise.
Mm-hmm.
So they were like, well, we got to do something that's going to build muscle, help recovery, because remember, as an athlete, it's not so much how we train, it's how we recover.
Right.
Okay. And I'll come to that in a minute. So that was his motivation, was he's training he's working with all these world-class athletes, Olympic champions, et cetera, et cetera. And he starts putting them on creatine. They start having these great outcomes. And oh, by the way, they're not dying of cancer at 45 or 50 years old. They're actually living. So that was kind of what some of his research showed. And yeah, people can look it up if they want. Volkov, same name as a famous pro wrestler, by the way, but different guy. And he's deceased now. But his thing was real simple. It was, yes, for strength gain. But second, recovery was the really important thing after a workout. You took the creatine to recover. And that, to this day, it would be the number one thing I would say to most people listening is the reason to take creatine is your recovery from a workout. Now, could that also be a recovery from an illness? Could it be a recovery from a lot of other things? Yes, it can. But there's detoxification agents also in creatine that'll help you to detox some, which is why a lot of athletes take it. There's just a lot of benefits to creatine. Okay, you don't have to overtake it though. I mean, that's the other thing. People in America, we want to overtake everything.
Right.
Nikolai would tell people all the time, you don't have to overtake this. This is not a drug. This is like Let it work with your body. Okay. So I take creatine every day still myself too, and it helps me with
How
my.
much do you take? I mean, what would you advise to somebody like myself? I'm 71, so and I'm very active. I went on a walk this morning. Yeah, I go to the gym probably 4 days a week. Do bicycling, do hiking. So I have an active lifestyle, and I have animals. We have large animals, and that I take care of. All rescues.
Yeah.
So what would be a good amount of grams for me to take?
If you're taking 10 grams, okay, that should be sufficient at
Then
your
I'm on
my
target.
age. Yeah. Now somebody maybe a lot younger than us that's training real heavy. Okay, can they take more than that? My son, for example, when he was playing competitive hockey and now
Mhm.
he's bodybuilding, yeah, he can take more than that because he's able to get it out of his system better than we will. But I'm on 10 grams a day.
Okay. Okay. That's
And
about what
that's
I take.
sufficient. And I one of the guys I work with, John Molson, him and I discuss this a lot. John's still a great athlete himself, and that's about what he's taking also. And some of the power lifters that I work with, that's what they're taking about 10 grams a day. And keep in mind, most of these people are our age group. They're 55 and up. So,
Right.
but yeah, there's just a lot of benefit to it. I just, there's so many things out there if you look that are really good for you. I take another herb called amla, AMLA, okay, which is Indian gooseberry, uh,
Okay.
believe it or not, and helps with cholesterol. Okay, it's another thing that I take. But I don't take a lot of stuff anymore. I used to take a lot more. When I was really training, I used to take, it was crazy. I used to travel, to drive my wife nuts. I had this big box of vitamins and I traveled all over the world with it. I'm not quite that crazy anymore. Since I really went vegan, I'm more dependent on the food than I
Right.
ever have been.
Right. Right.
Because I'm like, well, wait a minute, I can get a lot of this from food that, as opposed to, something that might even be synthetic or hormonal in nature. So if I don't know who made it, and I know a lot of manufacturers, so it's like, okay, I kind of know some of the stuff that I take. And I won't endorse any on your show because I'll get the other ones mad at me. But the ones that I know are clean. Their facilities are
Right.
clean. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like I know where the stuff comes from, and that's important too because you can take any kind of supplement. What it says on the label isn't necessarily the quality of the goods, and this is something Dr. Leung taught me years ago. You could buy this was then anyway. You could buy a metric ton of herbs many years ago for a very low dollar amount. The only problem was you had weeds, maybe bugs, and you process those herbs. Well, on the label it says, this herb or that herb,
Right.
and it's as far as government, it's fine. What's in there. But at the end of the day, would you prefer that all that junk was out of there and you wind up just with the extract being real, real clean? And yeah, you're going to spend more money for that. But the consumer says, well, I'm buying the same stuff. Your stuff's $10. This guy's stuff's $40. I'm going to buy the $10 stuff. Right. So, it's an age old argument in the supplement world. But as I've gotten older, like I said, I've gotten a little bit more away from supplements. The closer I am to nature, the better. Like if I can eat a papaya, for example, every day, a papaya, a honeydew melon, a watermelon, if I can eat those things every single day, I find so much sustenance. And I find my workouts are really good because they also give me a lot of hydration.
Absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
know,
Well, I'm kind of curious. And before we move forward, I want to remind people you're listening to the Plant Based Eating for Health podcast show. I am your host, Kathleen Gage, and I'm talking with John Solleder. And John, I know you've written a few books. I want to talk about that. But what I'd love to dig into right now is the whole issue of people's health that don't think that they can reverse
mm,
what are very reversible diseases and conditions, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, cholesterol, heart issues, cancer. A lot of that is reversible. And yet many people are so overwhelmed with all that's going on in the world right now. I mean, everywhere you turn, there's something going on. And I was talking to a woman who is involved in animal sanctuary. She goes, it just feels so overwhelming. I said, don't think about everything. Think about the one thing that you have control over. So For the people that are listening, that they know they need to make a change, they know their quality of life is not where it could be, what can you advise to people?
Okay, first thing, a little Tony Robbins quote, right? The past does not have to equal the future.
Right.
Okay, because my dad was an alcoholic did not mean I needed to be an alcoholic. Because my dad died at age 61 of pancreatic cancer does not mean I need to die of pancreatic cancer at 61. Conversely, because my mother made it to 92 doesn't mean I can ignore my health and make it to 92, because she pretty much ignored hers and she still made it there. She
Right.
didn't smoke, by the way. But at the end of the day, okay, there's no guarantees or promises. Well, my father, he lived on a farm and he did whatever and he lived to 90 and he smoked and he drank. Well, once again, he also probably was out clean air and doing physical labor all day. If you're sitting behind a desk, you got a different lifestyle.
Right.
Okay. So sometimes people look at the wrong family situation. Okay. We are all individuals. It doesn't mean we don't have DNA and genome from our parents and grandparents, but at the end of the day, we're all individuals. Okay. The future is up to me in terms of how I eat and what I consume. The one choice I have per day is what I put in my body. So for that sick person who's in ill health, been there. Okay. Been 90 pounds heavier, for example. After an athletic career where my joints were so beat up, there were days I couldn't even really walk. I'd had to push myself up to go somewhere. Okay. And I had to come to that realization that, hey, this is not a long lifestyle if I continue on this path.
Right.
So I made those choices. First thing you got to do is make the choice. Like Jay Kordich said, I keep quoting Jay Kordich, Jay the Juice Man Kordich, if for people who aren't familiar with him, he used to have a great saying, right? That you have a choice, sickness or health. Another great name from the past, Jack LaLanne, had another great saying. Okay, Jack used to say, nutrition is king, exercise is queen, put them together, you got a kingdom. Okay? Well, Jack was sick, and so was Jay. Jay was a cancer patient at 23 years old, almost died. Okay. Jack, I forget what Jack had as a kid, but Jack was a sickly child. So those guys overcame stuff with what? Fitness and nutrition,
right.
To Jack's quote, right? So you're no different. Okay. If you're sitting out there and you're listening to us talk and you're saying, well, I got this or I got that, I'm ready to give up. Well, first question, do you want to make some changes? If you want to make some changes, are you ready to make them now? Now, second point, you're not going to do these things overnight. If you haven't been in a gym in 10 years, you're not going to go and join the local 24-hour fitness tomorrow and get on the treadmill for 2 hours. I see that every January. I see people come to the gym is packed, and they're on the treadmill and they're killing themselves. I'm going, I've seen this person before. They're 50 pounds overweight. They're not going to last. And 2 weeks later, they're gone.
Right.
Never see them again. Point being, okay, baby steps. If you haven't walked around the block in 5 years, today say, hey, I'm not going to walk around the block. I'm going to walk to the corner. Look out your window. I'm looking out my window right now. I can see the corner. Walk to the corner. That is still better than what you did yesterday. It's improvement, right? And then tomorrow say, okay, I'm going to go to the corner and I'm going to add another quarter mile. I'm going to walk down to the next street. And do it gradual. And if you do that, you'll build up the health practices. Same thing with how you eat. Okay. If you had 3 steaks for lunch today and you listen to our show, you're probably not going raw vegan. You're not going to last. It's not going to work. But maybe tomorrow you say, hey, you know what? I ate meat 3 times today. Instead, now tomorrow I'm going to go 2 times. And maybe next week you go 1 time. And then maybe you cut it down to at a meal, maybe you consume half. Do it gradually, okay? And if you do it gradually, you're probably going to stick with it as opposed to jumping in. If I had jumped from how I ate to raw vegan last January, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Right.
I would have been back to McDonald's 2 weeks later.
Right.
Okay. But the fact that I did it and I saw a benefit and I said, I do feel better. My weight had already improved. It hadn't improved to the point that it did, but it had already improved. My hips were feeling better. My joints were feeling better. I was feeling better, more importantly. I was more productive in my business life because I'm still very, very active in my businesses. So at the end of the day, everything was good, very active with my family. It was like, hey, wait a minute. I'm getting all this benefit just by eating right. Wow. Interesting. So
It's
it's not where you start, it's where you finish. And take
okay.
those baby steps. But Jim Rohn used to say, just start,
Just start. Just
just
start.
start, whatever that is. Hey, if it's one push up today and it's one more than yesterday, guess what? You increased from yesterday. If tomorrow's two and Sunday's five, those are increases, right? So just go with that philosophy. Now, most of the people listening to your show are probably already health conscious and on this path, but if you haven't, this is how you have to think, because as human beings, we don't like radical change. We like
Right.
gradual change. Gradual change you can deal with. Overnight change, very, very difficult to deal with. So that would be my advice to people: is A, just start; B, take gradual steps, okay, and C, be realistic. There was a guy. I'll tell you this fast so we can answer other things. But there was a guy, and I really saw this January. He was at my gym, and I'm on the treadmill, and I'm jogging along, and he's next to me, and he's like swearing, and he's perspiring, and he's I can tell he's not enjoying himself.
Right.
And I said to him, I said, "Hey, buddy," and he was significantly overweight, by the way. He goes, I need to lose this weight fast. I said, having been there, I'm going to tell you didn't gain it fast. You gained it slow. Take your time. No, 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 I got to get it off. I saw this guy maybe another two times after that. Never saw him again.
Yep.
So he's probably back. He's probably gained what he lost. If he lost
Right.
anything in January, he's probably regained that, and he's probably in worse health. Now, I hope he's not. But at the end of the day, realistically, if he had come to the gym and said, "Let me start and let me build up," he'd probably still be in those good health
Right.
practices.
Right. I think one of the challenges for people is they try to go it alone. They try to figure it out all on their own. And what many people don't realize is all the things working against them, like the food manufacturers, the healthcare system, big pharma, they're all working against you because you turn on TV and all you're going to see is advertisements for drugs. And we start believing that's normal. And it's really quite interesting. Lately, I've been seeing a lot on different programs about healthy eating and plant-based eating. And it's like, finally. But this whole thing, like with red dye 3, yeah, they've made commitments to take it out of the foods, but that's not for another few years. It's like, wait a minute, if we're really that impacted by it, why is it not being taken out right away? And it has to do with money and profits and all that. But when you watch the movie, what the health, how did that impact your wife?
My wife or my life?
Your wife.
Uh,
Which your wife should be your life. So, happy
right.
wife,
She's,
happy
she's,
life.
she's certainly a big part of it. Unfortunately, my wife still eats meat.
Okay. Which
Uh,
is not uncommon. I mean, there's,
no,
a lot of mixed relationships where one person is a carnivore and the other is not.
she's not like she came to Costa Rica with me, and she was shocked because she also drinks coffee. So sorry for my pronunciation. I'm originally from New Jersey. I said coffee, and I know it's coffee, but
Coffee.
that's the Northeast pronunciation. But she was like, "And we're in Costa Rica." Well, I'm forgetting Costa Rica. You're not far from the equator. They got great coffee, right?
Right.
So the first night we're there, she has her last cup of coffee. I said, when we go to France tomorrow, there is no coffee. Like, you are living on fruits and some vegetables, okay, for the next 7 days. And I said, I'm just, I and so she knew what she was going in for. And first couple of days, she had a headache. By the third day, she
Mhm.
said, I haven't felt this good in 20 years. I said, sure, because coffee is also a very addictive thing. All that caffeine affects your brain. So she got off the coffee, and she since has gone back to 1 cup a day. I give her credit. She's one cup a day. And hey, 1 cup a day, fine. That's her choice. But she was on about 3 or 4. As far as the meat, she went a whole week without. And once again, by the third day, she said, I'm actually feeling good. I said, that's kind of what I'm trying to tell you. But unless
Right.
you do this, I can't tell you this.
Right.
I can tell you, hey, there's a great movie and I saw it, but until you go see it, you haven't experienced it. So she did experience it. She's fallen back some, unfortunately, but she has watched all the documentaries with me because I watch them repeatedly. By the way, I watch them on a regular basis. What the health. What the Health being one. Cowspiracy is another great one,
Absolutely.
by the way. Anything that Dr. Greger, Dr. Esselton, Dr. Campbell are on, I highly endorse. I believe in all of those three gentlemen. If they say it, it's probably true.
Absolutely.
I mean, those guys can't be bought. They're like the old Untouchables with Al Capone in Chicago. I mean, those guys can't be bought. They are not money motivated. I can't say that
You are
about
correct.
Can't say that about all plant-based doctors, by the way.
Right, right.
Can't say
No,
that
you are
about those
correct.
guys. And I think the world of Rip too. I've met Rip Esselton a few times. Also, a great guy. But my only point about that is you watch these things. Okay, the Game Changers is another one. Game Changers was dear to my heart. There's guys on that show that I know personally, and not all of them, some of them. And it's like, look, because you're a big, strong man or woman in a sport doesn't mean you need to be consuming dead animals.
Right.
Secondly, there's a whole other thing too, and the whole other part of this is I did not realize the economic impact of eating meat. Like
Explain that.
Okay, so I'm sitting there at that restaurant that night, and it wasn't like a Saul of Tarsus moment where a lightning bolt hit me in the head and said stop eating meat. It was just one of these things that I started to do, and because of that, okay, when I look at it, it was like, okay, I did this for me. I did this for selfish reasons. I did this because I wanted to feel better. Number one, live longer. Number two, by the way, nothing wrong. Selfish and selfless are very synonymous in a lot of ways. Okay, I have a family. I have two kids in college right now. Even though I'm 64, I got married later. So, being around for your family for economic reasons is important too. So I did it for a lot of good reasons. But what happened, okay, is I started to all of a sudden read some of the economics of the meat industry and the damage, unfortunately, that they do. Okay. And I get they employ a lot of people. I'm also a businessman. I get that. There's there's economic factors here too. I get all of that. But at the end of the day, when I started to realize some of the water consumption that happened as a result of the meat industry and the meat byproducts industry is where it really started to bother me.
Right.
Where I started to say, hey, wait a minute. There's places in the world that they don't have a drop of water to drink, to bathe, to prepare food, to do bodily functions. That's not fair for us in America to do that to the rest of the world. That's not fair in Canada. It's not fair in England. It's not fair in the quote unquote, first world countries that we just take that for granted. And I didn't recognize that. Once I recognized it, it became another thing. The other thing that hit me, and this is really funny. I'd love your thoughts on this. I'm a dog lover and cat lover. I've had dogs and cats pretty much my whole life. I got 4 dogs and 4 cats now, and if we weren't limited where we live to them with the town that we're in, we'd have about 20 of each.
Right.
And we love our doggies in particular. I love the cats too, but the dogs are just they're human beings. Matter of fact, you know what? They're better than human beings. I wouldn't even call.
My dogs have more clothes than I have, so let's just.
Oh yeah, my dogs sleep with me. I mean, it's
absolutely,
crazy. Absolutely. I got 2 Jack Russells and I got 2 gigantic dogs on top of it that are mutts, and they're all rescues, by the way. We rescue dogs like you do. But I come out of a movie theater on my birthday. And a lady selling little pot-bellied pigs.
Mm-hmm.
So I go over to the pigs and I'm holding one. And I started to touch him under his chin. And he fell asleep in my arm.
Oh.
And I said to my wife, take a picture of this and I want to post it on Facebook. Well, most people are like, oh, that's cute. That's sweet. There's one guy who I didn't even know who attacked me because, and I said there, this is why I don't eat meat. How could you slit this animal's throat? This beautiful little animal, sweet as can be, asleep in my arm. How could I eat this? Right. And anyway, so this guy, I eventually defriended him, but I was talking to another friend of mine who told me they had a similar experience with somebody who attacked them because of being vegan or even vegetarian. I'm like, look, I'm not going to tell you if you eat meat, you're going to hell. I don't believe that. Okay. But I do believe that you shouldn't do it for your own good health. I do believe that you shouldn't do it for the economics of the planet. I believe all of that. But that doesn't mean you have to do it, just like you don't have to stop smoking or drinking because I don't think you should do that. That's up to you. Those are, once again, I choose certain things to consume. You choose certain things to consume. I think my things are far superior and you'd probably feel better. But I believe in people's personal liberties on that stuff, as long as it doesn't affect other people. But
Right.
at the end of the day, when I got the economic impact of this stuff, it was amazing. And then when I get that people get so hostile about this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy called me every name in the world, and I'm thinking, if you knew me, first of all, if you knew my sports background, you probably wouldn't say that stuff. But
Right.
second
Right.
to that, the stuff he was saying was so vile. I
Hmm.
mean, vile. And I'm saying, buddy, I wrote back to him. I said, look, why don't you come on my podcast? Let me interview you. We'll debate the issue. I'll give you my facts, you give me yours. And he basically gave me the bird, so to speak.
Right.
And
Right.
I just said, you know what? I got other things to do.
Right.
Yeah. But I never had that experience before. I like nobody's ever attacked me for this stuff. And I'm like, I was laughing about it, but I'm thinking, because this beautiful little animal I dared to hold and challenge your belief system that somehow you were far superior to that animal. Have you ever listened to Gary Y, to that whole seminar that he did?
Gary Y.
I call him Gary Y. His last name is like Chesky. He does a
Oh,
whole
yes, yes, yes. And what is it called? Yes.
the greatest speech ever, I think is what
Yes.
he calls it.
Yes.
And I mean, that thing, they banned that thing in places, and I don't think he can run it on YouTube. It's crazy. But like when you listen to him, you can't not agree with him.
Right.
And that's where I'm at. It's like, look, if you could take your dog or cat and you could slit its throat, then I don't have any problem with you eating meat.
Right.
But if you couldn't do that, and I know most people who love their dogs and cats certainly wouldn't do that, that other animal feels just as much pain. And
Absolutely.
that other animal has a family. Those little piggies had a mommy and a daddy.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So that's the way I look at it. And people think I'm getting soft in my old age because I talk that way. But I'm like, look, if you look at the facts and then you look at all it, look, if none of that means a darn thing to you, look at the fact of the economic impact adversely that we're making on the planet by consuming these products.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
if you don't think your kids and your grandkids and so on deserve better, because we will eventually run out of water in this part of the world too. And so much of that goes, frankly, for livestock.
It does. And unfortunately, an issue that a lot of people don't look at is the human rights issues around the people that work in the factory farms. Many of those are undocumented immigrants. And, I have an issue with calling them illegals. They're undocumented. So, that whole it's interesting because a lot of people say, well, how could anybody work there? It's like, in some cases, that's all that's available and they have to feed their family.
Sure.
So there's so many layers to this that people either refuse to see or they just don't believe that it could possibly be true. So, that's why I'm glad we're having this conversation. But want to move back into business and the four network marketing companies that you have been with. What are the common threads that you've noticed in you mentioned that your performance has gone up as a result of being a plant-based eater, but what is the common thread that you see in high performers, those people that because I'm sure there's a high turnover of people that go in guns a-blaring, they're gonna set the world on fire, and then within
Yep.
30 days they're done.
30 days, you're being optimistic about
Okay.
it. You mean I have to work?
Yeah.
You mean these aren't pyramid schemes? I'm not going to be rich and just signing up.
Right,
No,
right.
the
So
reality.
what is that common thread? How does one become successful in either that environment or virtually any business environment?
It's funny. I noticed things over the years. The first thing I notice in all high performers is generally, and I'm sure there's exceptions, generally they get up early. There's an entrepreneurial, I call it the entrepreneurial mindset. Okay. There's a thing that happens in your brain, though, according to my friends that study Ayurvedic medicine, about 4:30 in the morning, about a half hour before first light. A lot of our Muslim brothers and sisters, they believe that too, by the way. In the Muslim world, they get up very early and they have like a pitch pipe that gets everybody up for morning prayer. Whether you're getting up for morning prayer, whether you're getting up for whatever, generally successful people get up early. And I think part of it is because we feel like somehow we're robbing the day that way. we have an advantage over the people who are sleeping in.
Right.
Like, for example, I'm generally at the gym, okay, 5:30, maybe
Right.
6. The odd day, 4:30. Well, why is that? Because once my brain starts to go to work, I might as well get up. What am I laying in bed for? Okay. So that's one thing. Now, I also go to bed early. I'm generally in bed 9:30, maybe 10 o'clock.
Right. Right.
If there's some sport, it's the seventh game of the World Series, and the Yankees are in it while I stay up. Yeah, that hasn't happened since 2009, so probably haven't stayed up since then. But I generally find that number one, they get up early. Number two, their health habits are consistent. They don't eat well today and then tomorrow go radically different. It's like, okay, they might go a little off the beaten path once in a while. They have to have a meal out or something. They eat a piece of birthday cake on their birthday or something. But the next day they don't sit there and eat, 4 pounds of chocolate or something. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like they generally are very, very consistent people. Performance takes consistency. I don't care whether it's in athletics or business, probably in the arts too. Generally, high performers are very, very consistent in their habits, their workout habits, their eating habits, their sleep habits. You got to be consistent in those things. Otherwise, you'll wear yourself out.
Hmm.
Okay. Don't, I've seen people in my business come in and go, I'm 1,000 miles a minute. Well, you run a marathon over the course of hours.
Right.
You run a sprint in 10 seconds. Well, if you're world class, 10 seconds or less. If you're me, 20 seconds or less. Most normal people, probably 30 seconds or less. I haven't run a sprint in a while. But my point is, okay, business is a marathon. And you gotta go about it that way. You're not going to build a business in one day. I don't care how good you are. All right. I've worked with billionaires in some cases. Okay, two times in my life, I worked with actual billionaires who have either bought companies that have hired me as a consultant that I've worked for, and I'm getting texts from these guys 5:30 in the morning, my time or their time, whatever time zone that they were in. I'm going, hey, these guys are not the idle rich laying in bed eating
Right.
bonbons like somehow people think. No, these guys work. They're into enterprise. They're hard workers. But the point is, generally, the high achiever gets up early.
Hmm.
A high achiever feels like, hey, if I'm back home to my house and the sun is up, I'm late. Now, you go back to sports for a minute. Two great coaches, okay? And there's a lot of great coaches, but two great coaches in the history of the National Football League. Vince Lombardi and Bill Belichick both had the same philosophy. If a meeting was, let's say, at 8 o'clock and you were there at 8:01, you were late. But really, if you were there at 10 to 8, you were late. You should be there a quarter of. Now, isn't that interesting? Two guys that have had immeasurable success in their professions.
Hmm.
Forget their football coaches. They could be CEOs. They could
Right.
be lawyers. They could be doctors. They could be whatever profession. They have that habit. That's always been me. It's been ingrained in me. All right, since I was young. I sold insurance for a short time, and I learned this the hard way. I had a very successful client in Philadelphia. And I was living in New Jersey, and it was a Monday morning. I was going down to see him at 8 a.m. his time. I left my house at 4 a.m., plenty of time, 2-hour ride. I hit the Liberty Bell Bridge, if you've ever been in Philadelphia, and some guy had a flat tire. I got to this guy's office at 8:07. I start
Yeah.
opening, this is pre-computers. I open my briefcase and he says, whoa, 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 you don't need to do that. I go, oh, are you ready to buy? Because I had sent him some stuff prior. He
Right.
goes,
Right.
oh. He goes, you're ready to leave. I go, I just got here. I go, I got stuck on the bridge. He goes, if I was now I'm about 23 at the time. He goes, if I was a valuable client, you would have been here the night before, slept on this side of the bridge to make sure you were on time. He goes,
Wow.
do you know what my time is worth, Mr. Solleder?
Wow.
And you know what? Never been late since. Now, things happen. You get a flat tire. You get stuck in traffic. Somebody else has an accident, God forbid. You got a million other scenarios. Leave early. Now, does that mean if you're late, you're a terrible person? No. But if you're habitually late,
Right.
then you don't honor my time, which means if you don't honor my time, you don't really honor your time, which means I'm not going to do business with you.
Right.
So once again, achievers show up on time. They show up and they show up on time, okay? And they show up repeatedly and they ask questions. One of the things I learned working with some of the researchers I mentioned and others that we don't have time to get into, but some of the ones that I met, okay, including, I'll never forget this, Dr. Wolf Droga, who was a Max Planck fellow from Heidelberg, Germany.
Hmm.
When I met Wolf, and he didn't even speak English when I first met him. He only spoke German, but eventually he spoke English. And I used to ask him a million questions about different things, about inflammation in particular. And one time he said, John, you would have been a great researcher. I said, why is that, Wolf? He said, because you ask why. One thing I notice about successful people, they ask why. They don't just accept all the answers, they ask why. When you talk about Mike Gregg or Colin Campbell or Caldwell Esselstyn and people in the space that you and I like, okay, of, veganism, vegetarianism, etc., all of those guys asked why. They're all researchers, right? And, you look at what Esselstyn says about oil, for example. Well, he's not just saying that because he doesn't like oil.
Right.
He's saying that because he's looked at all of these heart scans and said, well, I see the outcome. You want to eat oil, but at the end of the day, you're probably going to have a problem if you do. Okay. And I get it. And once in a while, we probably all eat oil. But at the end of the day, he's just saying, here's what all this asking why has resulted in all of these outcomes. So therefore, if you really want to be healthy, don't do this. And that's what all of those great minds do. And I just love to read all the research that some of these guys produce because it's fascinating and it's interesting.
It is fascinating. And, like Dr. Neil Barnard, when he was in medical school, they used to experiment on dogs. They would do whatever they had to do on the dogs. And he said he had an epiphany walking down the aisle one day where he saw all these carcasses and it was like, why am I doing this? And now he's a major animal advocate. It was plant-based and that was it. And it's interesting because I'm noticing, I was working with the National Health Association for a while with their podcast and had the opportunity to meet many of the luminaries and, actually break bread with them. Well, vegan bread. But it was fascinating to hear the journey they've been on and that a lot of them initially it wasn't about the animals, but now many of them are coming into the whole mindset that it is about the animals also. It's not just about what we put in our body, but what I'm curious about now, I know you're an author, and tell us about the books that you've written, and what have you found as an author to be the most enjoyable and the most frustrating part of authorship?
First frustrating part is when you ask about books and they're not on my desk like they normally are. But one series of books are called Moving Up books. Okay. There's 3 books on that. The last one was Moving Up 2020. And the other one is called Leave Nothing to Chance. And both are interesting titles. Moving Up really is a business title that I developed with a compensation plan for the company I still work with. But in there are a lot of how-tos. And I'll give you one really simple one. I don't care whether you're selling multi-level products or insurance or real estate or whatever. Take 10 pennies and stick them in your pocket first thing in the morning. And every time you talk to a prospect, whether they buy or not, move one to your right pocket. Now, by doing that, what do you develop? Everything else we're talking about on this call, discipline.
Right.
Habits, good discipline. And hey, if I'm going to be successful, I have to talk to people. So like that's one of many things that are in that book. You can get all these, by the way, on Amazon. And then Leaving Up is more about other people's stories, people that I've coached and mentored over the years in network marketing and some of the successes that they've had, some of the trials that they've had. Because nobody achieves alone and nobody achieves easily. I don't know a person yet that just is an overnight success story in network marketing. Most people grind it out. Most people go through 2 or 3 companies for that matter. It's kind of like they start. So like I started my very first company, I made a little bit of money and then they had a problem with the FDA. So I went and I sold insurance and said, I'm not going to do this again. And then all of a sudden, a guy got me involved with a water treatment company. And next thing you know, I'm living in Canada. And here we are all these years later. So, and I got a Canadian wife out of that too, by the way. But, it's not where you start, it's where you finish, number one. Number two, it's learning the skills. Network marketing can be learned. You can learn it from my books. Okay. I've taught millions of people literally around the world how to do network marketing. Somebody called me from Calgary last night and said, yeah, this guy's quoting you. I said, yeah, well, good. You know what? I take that as a compliment. Of course, he's not referencing it. It's your materials. I don't care. You know what? At the end of the
Right,
day,
right.
if humanity benefits, who cares who gets the credit, you know? But so yeah, so that's what my books are about. I do have a podcast, by the way, called Leaving Nothing to Chance, and I would love to have you as a guest on
I
my.
would love to be on your show for sure.
It'd be my honor. And that show, we talk a lot of business stuff, but we talk health, obviously. I got a lot of doctors on there, by the way, a lot of alternative doctors, some regular doctors too. And you can find that on YouTube. Or you can go into my name, John Solleder. So, I'm out there constantly talking and, about a lot of different things. My latest thing over the last couple of years has been two words: pivoting and agility. Now, pivoting, what happened was during 2020, I had the books coming out. So I had Moving Up 2020 coming out in December 2019, and I had Leaving Nothing to Chance coming out in February of 20. Now, you can't really pick a worse time than
Right.
COVID to bring books out, especially when you do public speaking. I have 60 cities I'm supposed to be in. All my books are in Spanish, by the way, as well. So I'm supposed to be in Latin America, Canada, US, and over in Europe. Well, needless to say, there are no meetings.
Right, right.
So my first pivot was to pivot from doing meetings to doing podcasts.
Okay.
That's where that started. And then the agility came in last October. I get an email from a guy in Vegas, and he's telling me, how smart and how pretty I am, And I'm like, wow, this is a great email. I showed my wife, look at this guy's email. Like, he's listening to my show. And I talked to him, and he says, what do you think of my email? I said, well, I loved it. He goes, well, I didn't write it. Well, who wrote it? Your VA? He goes, no, AI. AI can write that well, huh? So I started to get into the AI world, and now I'm doing all sorts of things with AI. I'm doing
Right.
podcasts on AI. I'm doing a podcast summit here in Lubbock, Texas, in August. Doing all sorts of things, utilizing AI. Not going to tell anybody I'm an expert in it. I'm not. But if you met me a year ago and you said AI, I would have been like this. Now I'm in my 60s. I don't want to know about anything new, but I had to have the agility. Here's where the agility comes in.
Right.
Think of it in an athletic term: agility, forward, sideways, forward, and back. I had to be willing to say, hey, something I know nothing about, I'm willing to embrace, and I'm willing to go through the sideways and the forwards and the backs with it to learn how to utilize it in my business. So that's kind of where I am now. Is I'm doing a lot of pivots and agility in my business life. At 64, I mean, I've been blessed to have good health thanks to the way I'm eating. And, God willing, I'll be here another 20 or 30 years. So I want to contribute. I want to contribute to
Absolutely. I love that agility idea because when I got involved in the internet back in 1997, I was a digital marketer way back in the day. And I was one of the only women when we'd go to conferences, I was one of the only women there and definitely one of the only female speakers. But I went through the same thing when 9/11 hit, when 2008 hit, and when COVID hit, and conferences came to a standstill because I've been a keynote speaker for decades. And it's interesting because with this last change that happened with COVID, I just said, I don't want to go out on the road anymore. And it's not because of my age, but it's because of my seasons in life. It's like, I just don't want to be around the hustle and bustle like in that context. But what I love is with the AI, I'm getting certified in AI, and there's so much more to it than people even can begin to understand. But yes, using it to write emails and write letters, it's very effective if you know how to do the prompts. But that's a discussion for a whole nother time. John, this has been delightful. And how do people find you? What's the best website to go to or social media?
If you want my books, obviously Amazon. If you want to reach me, johnsolleder.com. We set that up really just for people to reach us. There's some information on there about us. That would probably be the best bet. Look, I'm happy to talk to anybody about plant-based, about network marketing, about business in general, about AI, whatever.
About dogs sleeping with you at night. That's a great topic.
You know what? I don't know if people can see this or not, but that's Goose. That's my big dog.
Oh, how much does Goose weigh?
Goose is 115 pounds.
All right. Okay.
And believe it or not, he is the sweetest of the four.
I get it. We have a shepherd pit mix who was very abused. Most of the animals that we get, they've come from extremely abusive backgrounds. And it's interesting to watch them work through their own trauma and to learn to trust again, and that's something where consistency and doing something every day to build that trust and to realize anything can trigger them. So I believe that Goose is probably your sweet, sweet child. And John, this has been delightful. And for those of you who have been listening or watching, thank you so much. I'm Kathleen Gage. I'm the host of Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show. And we encourage you, go out and be consistent in what you're doing. Make choices that give you the quality of life that you deserve. Have a great day. You've been listening to the Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show. I'm your host, Kathleen Gage, inviting you to subscribe to this channel wherever you're listening or watching the show. And please let your friends know about the Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show. Live healthy.